Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Jakarta and welcome. Hope everybody is healthy and staying well. My name is Salsa and I will be the MC for today's forum. Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, or FPCI, is pleased to collaborate with National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, or GRIPS, to convene our joint discussion series. In this exciting collaboration, FPCI and GRIPS convene monthly public forum discussing most pressing international issues, foreign policy, and world affairs. Today, our forum brings the theme of Get to Know Generation Y and Z on their influence, drives, and worldviews. Before we move forward, please allow me to welcome Ambassador Yasoja Gunasekera, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to Indonesia, Ambassador Lina Anab, Ambassador of Jordan to Japan, Ambassador Yutaka Imura, former Ambassador of Japan to Indonesia and Senior Fellow Visiting Professor at GRIPS Alliance. Welcome, Ambassadors. To start our forum, I'd like to invite Dr. Dino Patillah, founder and chairman of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Dr. Dino, the floor is yours.
Everybody, good afternoon. My name is Dino Patillah. I'm chairman and founder of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia. And I want to say welcome to everyone who's joining us today. And also I'd like to welcome Professor Kunihiko Shinoda, who is a professor and executive advisor of GRIPS Alliance at the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies. And first of all, I'd like to thank Professor Shinoda and his team for co-organizing this public forum with FPCI. I'm very pleased to know that under FPCI and GRIPS collaboration, we have conducted 2 public forums so far, and today we're conducting our 3rd public forum with the title, Get to Know Generation Y and Z on Their Influence, Drives, and Worldviews. And I think this is going to be a very interesting topic. We will discuss more in depth about the role of Generation Y and Z in today's world, and what do they think about the global responses and cooperation to global challenges. Generation Y and Z are generations that are most connected, exposed, creative, and globalized in the history of humankind. We as a generation before them need to prepare and mentor them because they are now becoming a key player who drive global development, and both generations will be an important actor, not in 2 or 3 decades ahead, but in this decade. For instance, in 2025, the combination of both generations will create more than half of Asia Pacific consumers. So these generations will shape market behavior and consumer forces that drive the direction of the market. Startup companies that are founded by millennials are expanding rapidly and turning into unicorn companies in many countries like GoTo in Indonesia and Grab in Malaysia. As we know, during the pandemic, Southeast Asian economies is saved by e-commerce and digital platforms, and these e-commerce companies are run by Generation Y and Z. And they also have more say in the political establishment. Pew Research reported that Generation Z agreed that politics has never been as influential in pop culture as it is today, and they call for more representation across a full spectrum of issues. Today, we also see more the rise of political party driven by the youth and youth political figure who are getting more public attention in many countries. In Indonesia, for example, we see more political party or politicians branding themselves as a youth advocate. And all in all, the youth not only own their future, but they also are important actors of today. So therefore, their perspective and point of view and aspiration are very important for us to know and discuss. I wish all of you a fruitful discussion, and I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dino, for your remarks. Now I'd like to invite Professor Kunihiko Shinoda, Professor and Executive Advisor at GRIPS Alliance, to deliver his opening remarks. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Ambassador Dino Patillah, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to participate in the 3rd FPCI GRIPS Public Forum today. Since the middle of this year, GRIPS and FPCI have been collaborating on a variety of intellectual exchange activities, including online lectures and webinars. In this September, GRIPS President Tanaka gave a lecture on the theme of building Indo-Pacific cooperation in Asia in the 21st century at the second Southeast Asia Lecture Hall organized by FPCI. The event was attended by 2,500 students, including GRIPS students. FPCI has a wide network with universities in regional cities as well as capital cities in Southeast Asian countries, and I was very much impressed by the various questions raised by the young students with deep insight. GRIPS has been cooperating with FPCI as a university partner in the management of large symposiums such as the Global Town Hall held by FPCI on November 20th. And I was very happy to hear that 12,000 people from all over the world attended the symposium this year. GRIPS is also co-hosting the FPCI GRIPS Public Forum with FPCI 5 times from October this year to February next year. The 2 previous FPCI GRIPS Public Forums were held under the themes of opportunities and challenges for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region, and the Asian century projection, expectation, reality, where active discussions were held on Asian politics, security, and economy. In the third FPCI GRIPS Forum, under the theme of Get to Know Generation Y and Z on their influence, dynamics, and worldviews, we will have moderators and panelists from various backgrounds, such as TV news anchors, parliament members, presidential special staff, marketing strategists, and NPO social activists from Indonesia and Japan. As for myself, I hesitate to say that I belong to the baby boomers, 2 generations above Generation Y. And I'm like a symbol of Japanese society facing the problem of declining birth rate and aging population. In Asia, not only Japan, but also China and South Korea in Northeast Asia, and some countries in Southeast Asia, like Singapore and Thailand, will be facing the same problem of declining birth rate and aging population in the near future. In this context, younger generations, such as Generation Y and Z, are expected to become the core of consumer society and support economic growth in Asian countries in the future. Generations Y and Z are connected to each other via internet and social media across countries and are actively sending out information and taking concrete actions to solve various issues facing the economy and society in Asia. In Asia, in addition to pandemics and aging population with low birth rates, there are various issues such as climate change, clean energy, Industry 4.0, and women's empowerment. Japan is also promoting the Asia Digital Transformation Initiative with other Asian countries, where Japanese companies and Asian digital platforms and startups are working together to solve these social issues using digital technology. I strongly hope that many young people will participate in these efforts. I'm looking forward to listening to candid discussions of young generation experts from Japan and Asia with various backgrounds on social activities of Generation Y and Z. I'd like to conclude my opening remarks by wishing that many of the audience members who participated in the public forum will continue to participate in the various intellectual exchange programs jointly organized by FPCI and GRIPS in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Shinoda. Before we start the discussion, it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Timothy Marwon. Timothy Marwon is an Indonesian news anchor, newsreader, and executive producer for several TV programs at Kompas TV. He was nominated for 2017's Indonesia's Best News Anchor by the Indonesian Broadcast Commission. Without further ado, I'd like to pass over the floor to Timothy to moderate the discussion. Over to you, Mas Timothy.
All right, thanks, Asabila. Hi, everyone. I'm Timothy. That was a short introduction, but yes, I do news television. So that's me in short. It's a joy for me to join everyone here. As we know, the topic was also very interesting. So once again, I'd like to say hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the third FPCI GRIPS Public Forum, as also introduced to us in the opening. So by default, I am an old version of the so-called millennial. Yeah, old version. So I was born as the early millennials who are. I won't blame you if you find it hard to believe that I still belong in the group of in that group of age. But since I'll be entering my 40s in the coming months, yes, 40. But I'm sure we can all agree that the topic today is intriguing and very timely, actually. You see, more and more we see with the accelerated rise of digitalism, the advancing role of Generation Y and Z plays in shaping our world, our culture, our way of life, and even our policies. We could see that more and more. And it is most certain as members of these generations start to fill in more leadership roles in the future, their actions, or if I may say, our actions, become more and more important to understand, be it in education, in their aspiration, in economy, or even in governance. So therefore, I am delighted to have with me 4 speakers that fill a wide spectrum of concentration to discuss about this. First, we have Mas Billy Mambrasar, the Special Staff to the President of the Republic of Indonesia. Hello, Mas Billy.
Hello, Mas Timothy.
Hi, thank you for joining us today, Mas Billy.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So we also have Barahayu Saraswati, member of the Indonesian Parliament from 2014 to 2019 from the Gerindra Party, and she is now the CEO of PT Bima Sakti Bahari, and also the chair of the Gerindra Youth, Tidar. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
Hi there, Tim. Good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you again. I always see you in a very political events. So
Well, hopefully this is less political. So
I'm going to keep it political for you. So thanks once again for joining us. It's good to see you again. And we have with us also joining today, Mariko Saito, Director of Gender Action Platform. Hi, Mariko. How are you?
Hello, Timothy. Nice to be. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm pleased to be here.
It's great to have you. You're currently in
Tokyo.
Japan. All right,
Yeah.
in Tokyo. All right,
Yeah.
Beautiful city. Was supposed to go there last year. COVID
Very
happened.
cold
So-
down.
So I hope next year we could start going to Japan again.
Yeah.
And also we have Tomoko Takada, Regional Strategic Planning Director from Hakuhodo Institute of Life and Living ASEAN. Hi.
Long name. Hi.
Sorry, Moka.
Yes.
Moka Takada, yeah? All right,
Yes.
sorry. I wrote that wrong. So Moka, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you so
And
much.
you're
for
not joining us
having
from
me.
Japan, are you?
I'm from Bangkok actually, and my institute is based on Bangkok, studying about the ASEAN. So hopefully I can talk
Okay.
from those perspectives. Yeah.
We'd love to know the ASEAN perspective as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Now, thank you for your time with us today. I think we have around 15 minutes. And also, I'd like to remind everyone that we have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions for our speakers, feel free to write them down starting from now. I'm sure you could use either the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or put your questions in chat. Don't forget to also mention your name. And also, if you come from an institution, please mention your institution or probably your university, and who do you want the question to be addressed to. So you could start that from now. I'm going to start with my questions. First of all, just a little about each and every one of you. A lot of us already know probably most of the speakers here. We know this and probably don't know much about the other. If you would allow me, please, just a little about the background of your works. Like, what are you active in right now? Or maybe like some studies some updates about yourself. We might know you already, but probably there's some updates that we don't know about yet. So I'm going to ask Mas Billy to start off. So what are you working on right now, Mas Billy?
All right, so before being appointed as the special staff of the President of Indonesia, I'm actually leading a non-for-profit in education and human development. We're touching the underprivileged community in the Eastern Indonesia because of the inequality that we try to kind of bridge. And we believe that number one, education will be the bridge. And number two, the young people or young population will then, because of the social mobility due to education, can make a change. So that's my professional things that I've been doing for years. Then I'm appointed by the president to help him. My focus still on the same area of education, youth, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And academic-wise, currently I'm doing my study in human development and psychology in Harvard University, and my interest is researching on how can we intervene the behavior, especially the young populations of the country, by kind of tailoring the preference with the policy and political directions of a country.
All right, we could learn a lot from you in our talks. So I'm going to Mariko. Would you tell us a little about what you're working on right now, Mariko?
Yes, so hello, everybody. As you can see, I'm not a Generation Y or Z.
We can't see that, Mariko. It's not that obvious. So
can you see me?
No.
Okay. So I'm in the middle, like I'm the strike zone of the Generation X. So I'd be talking from that perspective. I been working for a very long time on promoting gender equality and women's empowerment. My career began from the UN, which I stayed with the United Nations Development Program for quite some time at the gender team, and also worked a little bit at Sri Lanka, and then came back to Japan. And since then had been working on both issues, on global issues as a consultant to the UN, sometimes the UNDP, UNITAR, UN Women, as well as working as an NGO, as director of our small NGO, which we do a lot of policy advocacy and research. So that's my main area of expertise, and which I hope I can share some insights from that.
Great. Thank you very much, Mariko. Moving on to Sarah. How about you, Sarah? A lot of updates from you, I'm sure.
Well, even though I was a member of parliament in 2014, 2019, but actually the reason why I got into politics in the first place is my calling to fight against human trafficking since 2009. And I'm continuing that now, even though I'm no longer in practical politics or in parliament. So I can focus more on that. Of course, you also mentioned I'm a CEO of a company which we focus on sustainable blue economy, since it's very much to do with products, marine products, because I'm also an activist for the climate crisis here in Indonesia, and an environmentalist. But my main thing is still for the advocacy for women and children here in Indonesia specifically, and especially to do with human trafficking. Aside from that, still very much active in politics, as you've mentioned, and just got elected as the chairperson for the youth organization yesterday. So, so still very much politically involved as well, but we need women's voices in politics, especially young women's voices. So that's why I'm sticking it out.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. So when you say update, it's like super update, like something that just came up yesterday. Thanks for that. Moving on to Mocha. Could you tell us a little about your work, Mocha?
Yes. So I belong to a think tank, which is located in Bangkok, and we are studying about the consumer trends, lifestyle, those kind of a new emerging trends among ASEAN people, and more from the anthropological perspective. And the last year's topic was about the Gen Z. I mean, this year's publication we have made is about the ASEAN Gen Z. So that's why I think I am here. And we have found out many, many differences from the millennials, Gen X, and the Gen Z from Japan as well. So hopefully I can talk something about this today.
You have a lot to talk about. We probably have to give you a whole hour to just present your findings. So, so it's pretty clear about everyone's area focus. Mas Billy, Mariko, Sarah, and also Mocha. So, focusing on Gen Y and Gen Z. As I said, a lot of us are part of the generation, but to be honest, I don't really understand my own generation, let alone Generation Z. So I'm sure a lot of studies could help us to understand that. And considering that those at very leadership positions in the world right now, let it be political or economy or business-wise or other social aspects, most of them sitting there at the very top are not the Gen Y or Gen Z yet. So a lot of policies, a lot of decisions are still made based on the former understandings on how the world works and what people want and how people react to things, which might be a different thing with the generation Y and Z. So if you would just share your opinions on each respective fields, everyone here, each speaker here in your respective fields, what have been your findings regarding Gen Y and Gen Z? If I may, I would like to start with Mariko.
Yes, thank you, Timothy. Yes, as I'll be speaking from the point of view from Japan, because
Yes,
we've been witnessing amazing, changes being driven by the two generations. As you know, Japan is a very sort of a patriarchal country. And in terms of gender equality and women's empowerment, we have a very long way to go. You've probably heard a lot of news from the Olympics and et cetera, et cetera. So from that background, however, and I've been away from Japan. I'm working at the UN for some time, but I've been back for about 15 years now. So I've been seeing this real big shift during this time, and it's been led by the youth, definitely. The recent, especially the youth, are now sort of, really sort of trying to change the very sensitive areas of policy and even the law. One of the biggest example of change is the change of the revision of the criminal law in Japan about the sex crime. And this was in 2017, and the Japanese sex crime law hadn't been changed for 110 years. Wow. And in fact, before the revision, the penalty for rape had been lighter than robbery. And it's just that, it's a very sort of a representation of how the law had been, created by the decision makers who were men, and the women's voices had not been reflected at all. And so what happened for the course of about a couple of years running up to 2017 was that a group of young women, NGOs, activists, also support groups, women's victim support groups, have gotten together. They really made a coalition, and they did lots of campaigns through the social network, and that really moved sort of the the public opinions, as well as they really worked together with the different generations of experts and the policymakers, and really advocating concretely as well. And the change was made that, the definition was widened a little bit, and the penalty was a little bit heavier. But things like this are happening. The youth are like changing there's a lot of media issues, gender issues on the media. We call it enjo, it sort of fires up because a lot of the messages on the commercials are really gender stereotype or promotes inequality, etc. So there are a lot of movements and led by the youth addressing these issues. So it's been, I think, these past couple of years, especially maybe 5 years, but especially accelerating these past couple of years, we're able to see the change happening, and they're actually influencing these really sensitive areas in politics and social issues. So we're really, really, learning from that, and also really happy to work with them too.
That's interesting. Just a follow-up question. What changed? I mean, the youth was always there, right? Yeah. There's always going to be a youth, right? It's just different people. Yeah. The problem was always there. As you said, the law has never changed for hundreds of years, for 100 years. But what changed? Why were the youth listened to this time? Why did the policymakers finally acknowledge the problem?
It's a really good question. It's actually a lot of sort of different comprehensive things happening at the same time. Social media is a big drive, I think. Education also has changed. I personally, coming from a UN background, I see the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as a very strategic entry point for our Japanese youth to enter and really be aware of global issues. Because before it was MDGs, and Japan was a donor country supporting recipient countries. So it was never our problem. But with the SDGs, all of a sudden, and the youth receiving education in their schools about the SDGs are opening up, and they get to more information, not just from the bigger media, but through social network, they can access to all different kinds of expert knowledge, etc. So that's really driving the change, I think.
So there you go. One tool that wasn't available before.
Exactly.
That was social media.
It's very huge in terms of because the media had been very the information had been quite sort of closed before. The large media had been really sort of dominant in Japan, whereas now with the social network and there are lots of information going on.
All right, thank you for sharing that, Mariko. That was eye-opening. Let me move on to Mas Billy. Mas Billy, you are also one of the young Indonesians that was chosen to help the president here. So, of course, you play a role, and on the other hand, you also see the role that your generation plays, or also the Gen Z plays. So, what would in your area of work? What have been your findings about the Generation Y and the Generation Z?
There are a couple of misunderstanding or misperceptions about the generation Y and Z that most people would think politically these people are liberals, like agree on climate change, be kind of like support of any kind of sexual orientations, open-minded and everything. But in fact, the latest research shows that these generations are more polarized than ever before, and it's happening in all around the world. For instance, in the United States of America, between the left and the right, or democratic versus republics, it's like consists of both sides of Generation Y and Z. And I think that's also happening in Indonesia with the previous elections of like people are more to the left and right, and both sides have this kind of people who are grouped and polarized. And the reasons of that is related with the second point that I want to make about inequality. It's like the Generation Y and Z are grouped into like the upper and middle class income, which is the minority, who are more materialistic, thinking about finance and everything, and the remaining of the populations in the lower and middle class income are struggling really hard to get upward in the social mobility, and this group of youth are the majority. It's like if you're looking at the numbers of Indonesia, only 8% of the populations of these young people can access tertiary education, in comparisons of more than 90% dropped out in junior high school and senior high school. So those people in this kind of bottom of pyramid is full of anger, because they feel that we're not just more than numbers for political reasons, for markets, for anything. We're not really heard. So because of that reason number two, which is inequality, the number three, this group of people are really distant from the government and governance, not from politics, from the governance and governments. What I mean by the governments and governance is that some people think that involved in politics means that opposition, protesting via social media, tweet and everything, but actually the government desperately needs the help of these young people to be the partners to do the development. If we keep the distance, then we cannot be helping our government to kind of accelerate the progress. And lastly is the mental health issues, which is actually closely related with my research. The latest research shows that more than 50% of the young people in the United States are having the MDD, or major depression disorder. And it's because of the social media. And because of that reason, number four, the people, that's number five, the people in the status quo who is in the power, who kind of possess the money, the wealth, keep the status quo of being in that position, because the young people are so distant from that governance and governments, full of anger, feel apathetic about the current running political systems, everything. So what I'm doing with the president right now in most of our discussions is finding strategies on how to rightly involve these young people to not only be heard and include their opinions in the policy making, but also involving them in doing the developments, like real development. And my task so far has been in the outer provinces of Indonesia, in which the inequality is, I think, the worst.
So from your studies, I don't know if it goes that far, but what will be the outcome if these issues are not addressed promptly, like when they distance themselves from the government, when that causes a detachment from that, and also how it affects them internally, individually, psychologically. So what would be the outcome if this is not addressed, and who could address it when, as you said, they're detached? I mean, they feel a distant with the government.
So I think, don't forget that Indonesia will be facing the demographic bonus in 2030, 2045, in which 80 to 90% of the populations will be at the productive age, and Generation Y and Z will be the most of the populations, as in the numbers of demographics. So this is very dangerous. If they're not involved with the distance, keep being distance, then who is going to be making our country to be a developed country? Because we really hope for their involvement in it. The second risk I would see is that the smoothness of the government to be running, if the country is full of the populations filled with anger. Instead, if we're successfully bridging that starting from now, then our country will be so powerful when we face our demographic bonus. And I think there's a lot of good examples of other countries like South Korea, which has been, involving the young people, investing a lot in the young people to kind of, experience, to benefit with their power, the strength, like what's happening right now.
All right, thanks, really, for sharing your thoughts. Now, moving on to Mocha, I'd like to know your insights about what you've learned from your research, especially when we see a huge cultural explosion within the youth right now, how borders are crossed so easily in digitalism, and how a nation could affect another nation culturally and so on. So what have been your findings?
Yes. So based on our survey, so we have done different quantitative and qualitative survey to the ASEAN users alongside with millennials. And the key finding, which was interesting, was so I think millennials were often said to be me generation, more about the self-centered, caring about themselves, quite taking themselves quite important, which is amazing thing, I think. And I am millennial
I would
myself,
really love to beg to differ, actually, but I can't really say that. So.
And when it comes more about the generation that in ASEAN, there are kind of a bit nice balance of Gen X and Gen Y, which is Gen X is more about the sacrificing themselves to protect their families or building a country or building society, that kind of people. And Gen Y more about the taking care of themselves, that kind of a generation. Then Gen Z is very harmonious generation, we named. So they were quite taking nice balance of contributing to society and contributing or having treasuring themselves. So they try to make happy society or happy surrounding alongside with happy me. So try to find a nice, perfect balance of like happiness within themselves and outer world. So that was quite important point. So I think they understand the pain of others and the pain of themselves as well. So that is why I think they are passionate about changing the world in a better place than anything before, and quite serious about the making a changes in society, and they're seeking a solution to the different problem happening in societies. So I think, again, as Mariko-san has mentioned, SNS is helping Gen Z not only advocating the issues, but also learning about the issues as well. They are quite easy access to understanding different issues and also addressing. So that was what I found it out in the survey.
That sounds like they have the hardest job. I mean, Gen X is
Yes.
thinking about the nation, the bigger picture. Well, Gen
Yes.
Y, I think about myself. So that's probably the easiest job here compared to the all generations there. But even that is hard enough. We know how hard it is to satisfy ourselves as well. So does that create pressure to Generation Z, or when they have to create that harmony between their own happiness and trying to create an impact in the world, and an impact that is felt by other people and has a positive effect? I would think that that's a big pressure.
Going to be a big pressure. It sounds like it is, but interestingly, so asking them about how they've grown up, many of the Gen Z said that they were grown up in very casual, happy environment. In the same time, they learn about to have a critical mind, so think by themselves, understand the world issue, and think. So that was quite interesting part. And but also they were taught to learn about the very traditional ASEAN values as well. So only being critical doesn't allow you to survive in the Asian world, I think. So that was quite interesting. So I think they are equipped to be able to wish and create those harmonious world. So instead of feeling pressured, I think they were well equipped by the either millennial or Gen X parents. So that is my point of view.
All right. Thanks, Mocha. Now, moving on to Sarah. One reason I kept you last because you live in so many worlds. You're a mother, you're a business person, you are a politician, an activist. So I would like to know your thoughts on what has been your observation in these different parts of your own world.
I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I was hoping to gotta go first because now I'm getting all these ideas from Mariko, Moka-san, and Billy, But okay, well, first of all, obviously, I'll go into something that they haven't talked about before, which is politics. And I mean, Billy also mentioned this actually, that it's not that they're apathetical, because there's a lot of assumption, and the media sometimes portrays how the young generations are very apathetic towards the political issues and what's going on politically. And I don't think that's true because, from my experience, for example, TikTok, okay, it's interesting how when I post something that's actually political, I get more views than when I'm posting something that isn't political.
Really?
So there is a high interest. Yeah, I mean, surprise. There's a high interest even by the youths, and we see this as, you're in the media, when we're talking about political issues, whatever it is, it's always deemed as a hot issue. So I think that there is a disconnect between the reality and what's actually being said. So I don't think it's apathy, but it's a distrust and disappointment, because the youths, whether it's Generation Y or it's Generation Z or Y, we're going through a transition, or well, for us, Tim, we've gone through that transition, but since we're in the upper ends, but especially for the Generation Z, they're going through that transition where they're just coming out of college, or they're still in college. They have their idealism of what they've been taught as what is right, and then they're faced with the reality that, oh my goodness. And it's not that the reality is a sad place. It's just that they are faced with other people who do not have the same opinions as they do. And it's trying to connect between their idealism with other people's. And please remember, Indonesia is a 270 million people, population country. Yeah. You are always going to find people from different backgrounds with different ideologies and different idealisms. Even when I was in parliament, I was only 1 out of 560, now it's 575. You're always bound to be meeting with people who come from completely different backgrounds, who grew up in different cultures. Indonesia has hundreds of ethnicities, hundreds of dialects. There's always going to be differences. So I think it's marrying that, and again, to put to reiterate what Billy was saying, we don't have to wait until 2030, Billy. The millennials and the Gen Z are already the majority in Indonesia. There's 53% of us. The productive age is 70.72% based on last year's, okay, so 2020's demographic, 70.72 for the productive age, and 53% for millennials and Gen Z alone. So we are already the majority. Now, however, so that brings up very interesting questions to do with politics, because obviously politics, it's all about votes, right? It's how to get. So when you know that, oh my goodness, 53% of the votes that we need to get are from the Gen Z and millennials, now the leaders that are from the baby boomers, the generation before us, they're really asking, what are you all thinking? And now there's surveys coming up that shows that the youths are interested in the climate change issue, environmental issue. It's only second to corruption. We still have issues with corruption. So that's like number one. Number two happens to be climate change. And then, but aside from that, Mariko-san, we can definitely talk about this all day until tomorrow, because I'm also an activist for women and children's rights. And we are at the moment still in the heights of discussion and fighting for the sexual abuse eradication bill. And this, Tim, that is a very controversial and highly debated bill, because again, we are facing the 270 million that's being represented by the 575 representatives who come from different ideologies. And here's the thing, Indonesia does not have a separation between state and religion. This is the difference, the main difference between us and other countries. Other countries, you cannot put it in. Here, the fundamentalists, the far rights, right, are fighting to ensure that their views are being included in our laws, and that is a huge debate. So we are seeing more of the youths, voicing out their concerns. But I'm also reiterating what Billy said. There's a huge disconnect. There's a huge social gap, social disparity that needs to be addressed. And a lot of that is to do with education as well. So Billy and I, we talk a lot about this so often, because it's, it shows when we, like, for example, this year, I know from the delegates of Indonesia that are representing us in the Y20, and, Japan is also there, right? And so it was really funny this year in Italy, because Y20 this year was in Italy. We're the presidency for next year. When they're talking about sustainability, when they're talking about climate, the developed countries, there was one delegate apparently who was already voicing out concerns about space junk, whereas in Indonesia, we're still talking about clean water. It's like we're still talking about access to clean water. We're still talking about access to, health facilities and, basic human rights and all of that, and the waste management system. They're already talking about, in other countries, they're already talking about space junk. So so there's this huge disparity. And then the last thing I will mention is also about urbanization. It's been going on for years. We all know that. However, there is, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel with the digitalization that's happening. We are seeing now a lot more movement from the youths that are in their villages. We call it the Petani Millennial. These are the millennial farmers, right? They're trying to show, hey, farming can be cool, right? And which is something we need, because it's like, hello, we have a huge population, but we have people who are still starving, right?
Exactly.
I've been saying all the negatives and all that, but the last thing, right? Light at the end of the tunnel. There is a plus with the digitalization. There is a plus with the social media, where the youth that before did not have access to voice to basically voice out their concerns and their interests, have that now as their platform. And as long as they're creative, which the youths are, especially Indonesian youths, they should be able to basically access that. And we should be able to support them in order to find more equality and to lessen that gap.
So one thing, Sarah, you were talking about how politicians look into what the youth want, especially Generation Y and Z. Does that mean that they will be more listened to? Their voices will be heard by politicians in the future?
Let's hope so.
Or just to extent where we could get their voices, or what would you say about that?
Well, I'm glad that I'm among the youth, as Dino earlier mentioned, right? There's more youth politicians, and I'm blessed to have been given the trust and the mandate, not just as the chairperson for the youth organization wing of my party, but also as actually vice or deputy chair of the party, actually. So, and Tim, how outspoken I am. So I'll definitely make sure my voice is heard. and so I think we need more of that. I think the parties across all the parties, especially those that are in parliament, need to show a real effort, not just for the sake of getting votes, but a real effort to listen to what the constituents, and that's us, right? And I think it's important for Billy, myself, and a lot of us youths in Indonesia that have platforms to push for the youth to, hey, you need to speak out, you need to speak up. And we've had this issue, Tim, where we have the silent majority, right? And it seems that there's a lot of influencers that are really, and it's not just about social gap. We're also talking about ideological gap. We have a lot more influence in the fundamentalist, and I dare I say even radicalist views that have entered Indonesia or have been around, but they've just been silent. And within the last 10 years, they've been very loud and very outspoken and making themselves known. And we need to show that the moderates and the nationalists are still here. And so the silent majority need to not remain silent, but to be more outspoken.
Okay. I see you're still very passionate with politics. It's in your voice. We could hear that very loudly. So it's great to know that.
It's not about politics. It's about injustice.
Through politics, I guess that's one way. So thanks a lot, Sarah.
Thank you.
I'm moving on. Let's talk about the world of Gen Y and Gen Z. So the world that we're living in today, most particularly the effects of digitalism and social media. It's not about just giving everyone a voice where social media steps in, but it's about the technology that is available for them now. We see a lot of technology, probably in the form of apps or even gadgets coming out, which kind of like decentralizes control and decentralizes broadcasting, decentralizes so many things, which gives everyone a chance to either be someone, to be heard, to create, to start something, and it kind of gives everyone a relatively similar level playing field. I say rather because it's not really in general, but we see that how digitalism really affects and how digitalism really helps us to pop out or to just recognize somebody who probably didn't have a chance in a more centralized world, centralized media, centralized technology. So what is your comment on that? I'd like to know everyone's comment on this. So I'd like to go to Mocha first before I move on. So I'm just shifting everyone here. So you might have a long wait, you might have a short wait here, but I'd like to know everyone. So how has been the effect of this, Mocha?
So can you repeat the question once again? Sorry.
Yeah, so the effects. So the easy question would be the effects of digitalism and social media and how this shaped the generation Y and Z.
Yes. Again, so as I mentioned, So it becomes a very nice gateway to understand the world issues in a very comprehensive and very heartfelt way, may I say? Because I think there is different media that is targeting generation Y and Z to understand the issues visually with the short videos and stuff. So I think that is something very helping Gen Z. And another way of helping Gen Z is that the SNS and those kind of media provides a place for them to express and show their opinion. So they learn and express in one places. I think that is the value of digitalization and the value of the SNS for their activities.
So, but it doesn't stop at expression, does it? Like the usage, Gen Z usage of social media, it doesn't stop at expressing themselves, at showing or showcasing their talents, but it also like, and how they consume and how products also reach them and so on. So is this the future? Is this what we're gonna see, or like the death of what we know marketing has been?
But I believe that the Gen Z will continue to expressing their opinion, and I think it's the same with Japan and the ASEAN. But having the political opinion and being opinionated is getting, I don't want to say fashionable, but it's becoming something that is cool to have their own mind and have their opinion. So I think this is something very good influences that SNS may also.
All right, thank you, Makasan.
Thank you.
I'll move to Mariko-san. What is your opinion on this, the effects of digitalism and social media and how it has shaped the generation?
Right. Thank you. And you also in your first phase of your question mentioned about the globalization. So I want to share with you sort of a trend that I see in Japan is that, and I think in terms of the top leadership sort of segment in of these generation Y and Z, who come from a wealthier family, who are, have the opportunity to have lots of access to resources, opportunities, I think had really this SNS digitalization had really opened up their sort of the spectrum of their sort of worldview and how they access to that global issues and really sort of work on it as well. I mean, I'm sure Sara-san are close, you guys know about the top sort of the leaders of the Y7 or the Y20s from Japan, the delegates. I mean, I've seen them, speak at events and their, opinions and how they advocate to the global leaders, and they're like really brilliant. So that is, they're far sort of advanced from, for example, our generation at that age. So I think that's one trend. But then at the same time, sort of the rest of the generation, sort of that group, who do not have that opportunity, are said to be more inward looking in Japan. And sometimes I think they have more access thanks to the digitalization, like pop culture, or so that kind of like games, etc. Sort of that's how they access the world or outside of Japan. But I don't think they go into politics all that much. But at the same time, but then I was really interested by the comments made by Billy and Sarah about that frustration, and the younger generation. I mean, Japan has. I mean, our generation experienced sort of a economic growth, and the life is going to be better. But then the generation below us were stuck in the economy that had declined and is never sort of uplifting. And the numbers might say, the figures, the economic statistics might say that we're improving, but they just don't feel it, right? And they were brought up in that sort of all through their lives. They were brought up under that situation, and they look at the politics, they look at outsider, some are really angry about these fortunate people and their own lives, making that comparison. So there's a lot of sort of verbal internet attacks, etc. That goes sort of really extreme as well. So it's sort of, I think there's sort of like a divide in Japan of how you make use of the digital tools.
Oh, interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Mariko-san. Sarah, what would you say on this? Because I'm sure you've been there, you're still in the digital media, and you've seen how it has shaped our culture and just the way we interact.
Yeah, you know, I also mentioned digitalization as one of those, positives, and we're seeing this. But there was an interesting question that I was trying to answer in the chat as well. Someone asked about how can we make the youth care more about humanitarian issues, which is really interesting because, well, at least in my opinion, I think it's not necessarily they don't care, because I think a lot of them do care. It's the same thing with politics. They do care. They voice out a lot, and we have what we call them netizens, right?
Yeah.
So it's basically those who are the followers, those who comment on your posts and everything. So we do have a lot of interactions with the youths that are using social media, right? And it gives them access to the politicians, gives them access straight to the governors, to the regents, and the more the governors and the regents and the deputies, those that are more popular usually are those who interact directly with their constituents and with the youth through social media. But here's the thing, with so it's not that they don't care, but I think we're seeing a lot of, as we've shifted from the baby boomers. And I think I felt this, the Generation Y, the millennials, we were the transition. I remember we were just learning how to type for the computer in like 5th or 6th grade. Now my son, who's 6 years old in 1st grade, is already learning coding, for goodness sake, right? So that's he's Generation Alpha. But what I'm saying is, with the Generation Y, with the transition, with what comes with the digitalization, comes also instant gratification. There's almost like less value on working hard, because they stress so much on working smart that then they take it for granted. And it's affecting how they view humanitarian issues, whether it's social issues, whether it's to do with domestic abuse or it's to do with climate change. They care, but do they have the energy to get out of bed and do something about it? Because it's so easy for them to kind of just, I'll do something by just typing and clicking away on my phone and posting something about it, and then that's it. So I think it's more of that issue. It's about, hey, like, you do actually need to get up and do something and find work and or create jobs. We need more youths to create more jobs, because they're the majority, they're the productive, they're creative, they're the ones who understand the digital world more than the older generation. They're the ones who can adapt. With this pandemic, we've seen how Indonesia can actually survive better. I mean, I was quite pessimistic in the beginning. Now I'm optimistic, because I'm like, wow, a lot of my friends, even when they lost their jobs, they were okay, because straight away they managed to switch to something else and start selling online, right, Tim? I'm pretty sure you got all those messages. Hey, do you want to buy my cakes?
Especially during Christmas time. So
especially now, I've got hampers for you to buy, right?
But very, very interesting. Like as you said, it's about realizing that this is also, at least for now, it's a tool, and don't stay there, but use it as it is, which is the tool, right? So you still have to do a lot.
That's so important.
Beyond that. So moving on to Billy. Now, I'd just like to ask a question. I add to that question, Billy. It's still about digitalism and social media, but also about technology itself, how it can empower so many people and individuals. And we've seen that. And how could the Gen Y and Gen Z use the technology as well to empower their generation, to empower the nation, to empower the world?
Before touching to that question, I think a bit, elaborate on what Sarah's answers before. That is, what I meant by apathetic wasn't the apathetic, politically apathetic. But they're very vocally politics, and I also am a follower of Sarah in TikTok and Instagram, and kept commenting, looking at how people interacted, and kind of like driven, especially on the political religious issues. it is not about apathetic towards politics. They're very vocally politics, but distant with the government, willingness to be partner with the government to solve the issues instead of like being just the opposition, especially on the digital era in which you're using the digital and social media to oppose instead of looking for solutions and partner with the government to deal with those issues. So just a bit clarifications on that point. About the technology and digital. However, a couple of studies in developing countries show that it actually increasing the inequality between different groups of demographics of amongst young people. In Java Island, it is more than 60% who have access to internet. But if you go to the eastern part of the country, it's only around 3 to 5% of the internet penetrations. That means a lot of young people in the outer provinces still have no internet access. And thankfully to President Joko Widodo this year, because I was in the meeting, he instructed to do the transformation, the national digital transformation, in which he ordered to increase the budget for increasing the digital infrastructure, as well as the human capacity building for that to reduce the inequality. I traveled to 22 different provinces in the previous years on my assignment, special task of the president. When we're talking about education, for instance, and if you ask Indonesian, who is the hero of education in the education sector, they're most likely to just mention one startup with one name, oh, it's maybe Ruang Guru, something like that. But actually, when I travel to those 22 provinces, there are heroes, local heroes, to fight for education out there who have no access to internet, who doesn't have Instagram account, who doesn't have Twitter, who doesn't post on Facebook, but they do real things on the ground to help this country in the education sector. Talking about Petani Millennial, because Mbak Sarah mentioned about it, if we're asking them, do you know anyone or anything in relations with agriculture, young people like agriculture, maybe people will say Tani Hub. But actually there are thousands of young people of Indonesia out there who fight for agriculture, who fight to give the farmers
undiscovered
rights, income, but they have no access to internet. They have no digital access and everything. So I think in a way, the digital and technology could increase the inequality for those who have access to internet and digital, or even have money to pay advert for publicizing yourself in the national TV will be known, whereas those other young people will not be known. So this is, a note that digital could, but also could help, but also actually will be increasing the inequality if we do not manage it. However, if you're asking my personal opinion, I am very optimistic that digital and technology will be the solution to reduce the inequality. If we, number one, as what President Jokowi is doing right now, increasing the digital infrastructure. Number two, provide education and training for more young people to have access to digital and technology and be able to do it. And number three, provide access, because sometimes you have internet, you have technology, but you have no money to buy pulsa or to buy credits, so how to increase the access for them financially to then utilize it really well. Lastly, my point about the downside of digital, and I think Mocha has touched a little bit about it, that is mental health issues. As an educator, when I talk to my students, especially from Generation Z, they keep looking at this mobile phone, Instagram, and they start comparing their lives to the other, lives. It's like, people in Nusa Tenggara Timur, for instance, of the eastern provinces of Indonesia, looking at how fancy the lives of youth in Jakarta, It's like, oh, they go to malls. Just recently something happening in the Twitter, like very viral about a Papuan who wanted to watch Spider-Man, and because he doesn't have cinema and he looked at Instagram of people in Jakarta watch Spider-Man, he bought a ticket, an airplane ticket, just to go to Jakarta to watch the Spider-Man. I think the Sony Pictures from the United States kind of give comments that, oh, we're gonna give you a present because of your, spirit, stuff like that. But I think it's a satiric in a way that this increasing the mentality of like, the depression. I was talking about depression, and then jealousy, and jealousy will create anger. And if it is combined with the politics view of like, oh, the government is so unfair. It's so unfair and stuff like that, it will be increasing the anger. And it is something that you see what's happening, recently if we don't manage it. So as an educator, the implication is that how can we also have a knowledge to teach, to train, and to direct our students, our young people to use the technology well. So then it's not going to be, providing negative impact, whatever that I was talking about.
Great. Thank you, Billy, for that. So before I give out my last question, I guess we'll just go to Q&A because I see I have questions here from the audience. So I'm just going straight to question number one. This is to Billy. So this comes from Joshina from UMKM Papua. As a youth from the eastern part of Indonesia, how do you speak up on human development in Papua towards the digital era? What should the youth be equipped with to be able to compete with the rest of the world? Billy.
I was just talking about how low is the internet penetration, and that's what I've been talking in a lot of national meetings in the palace, with the president, with the ministry, with the parliament members. I was always raising the inequality of internet access, not just for the youth in the eastern Indonesia, but including western Indonesia, like the outer provinces. A lot of young people, they do not have access to digital, they do not have access to technology. And when I spoke with the president and he responded positively, he was making two meetings, the national meetings, in which he gave order to the ministry and relevant ministries to increase the budget for digital infrastructure development. And I think we see the progress. We need to kind of keep doing it, accelerating it. And I think there is a blessing in disguise of the pandemic COVID-19, that it forces us to kind of, adapt, and it forces the country to then increase it, increase the accessibility. So that's what I've been doing. I also talk to private sectors to kind of partner with the tertiary education in the Eastern Indonesia provinces to increase the digital infrastructure. So just recently, I was successfully kind of, drag one of the biggest tech company in Jakarta to partner with Polytechnic Negeri Fakfak to equip that university in the Eastern Indonesia with the digital technology to provide access for the youth there. But I think we need to work together. I think Sarah and I are talking about a couple of strategies that we're gonna work together. I'm gonna help her, of course, with the organization that she's kind of co-chairing to increase the access for youth in Eastern Indonesia as well for that.
All right. Thank you, Billy, for sharing that. Moving on to the second question. This is from Amy from APU University in Malaysia. Do you think social media influencers can in some way help with the lack of awareness of social and environmental issues? So just from a more popular aspect, or we'd like to know how social media influencers have an effect to the youth. I'd probably go to Moka-san first.
Yes. So about that question, that is a very good question. So before this survey of Gen Z, we have done another survey on year 2020, which was named, we call Conscious ASEANs. And in that survey, we tried to survey those who were quite passionate about the different social and environmental problems. And we interviewed different consumers on how they understand about the environmental or social issues and how they react. And the social influencers' influence was quite huge, we say. Everyone mentioned about some influencers, and starting from environment to social, there were different influencers across the ASEAN, and they have been very active on creating the awareness and actually telling people how to act as well. So it was quite interesting to see, because in Japan we are quite seeing those social influencers who were very vocal about the social problems, but it's quite new. But 2 years ago, that the survey we have done it 2 years ago, but at that time in ASEAN it was quite active, and they were quite contributing on those issues. So I think that was another good point about their presence, I think.
All right, thank you, Mariko-san. Maybe Sarah, if you would like to add, or Mariko-san, if you would like to add. No, okay.
All good. Yeah.
All right, Mariko-san, would you like to add to this?
Yeah, just to add to Moka-san, yes, definitely. I think the influencers, like Moka-san said, in Japan, for the influencers are often, like actresses or singers, or, a lot of them, to actually mention anything political, it was a taboo for some time, because of there are a lot of sort of, the sponsors issue, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very sensitive, but I think recently they've been very voiceful about it. So even the recent election that we just had for the lower house, there were a lot of sort of calling out for, let's go to the election to the younger people. And that had, I think, influenced some of the movements. And so some of the social issues are being taken up thanks to these influencers, I think.
All right, thank you, Mariko. And also, I guess in politics we see that as well here in Indonesia. I mean, Sarah, you know that how when singers or artists, actors, sound like give a political opinion, they always get comments and, hey, you're a singer, just sing. You don't. As if they're not entitled to a political opinion. So I guess we see that here as well in Indonesia, I guess. So, but I want to move on to the next question, because it's still kind of related, actually. This comes from Wulandari from the Bengkulu Youth Forum. Are Generation Y and Z actually concerned about environmental issues, and how should we ensure their participation? Now, this was also a point that you were talking about, Sarah.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, to link with the influencers question, here in Indonesia, it's a business. It is a business. I mean, to have an endorser, to have someone, there are people who only have like 5, like basically there are rates. Like if you have 5,000 followers, how much is it to post? If you have 10,000 followers, how much is it to post? It's a huge business. There are management agencies, like not even real agencies, but management agencies that manage these influencers, So if you want someone with more than 10,000 followers per post, it's this many rupiah, And so it's a huge business. It is no longer a question for us, because there are certain accounts, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, or whatever. And that's why, Ronaldo is being paid like millions of dollars per post. Okay. Yeah. It's not even funny. So it is a business here in Indonesia, especially because we have such a huge consumer driven, businesses, and the consumerism is huge. And when it comes to, politics, Tim, unfortunately, then people start questioning, are you actually doing it because you really believe in it? Yeah. Or are you doing it just because you're paid for it?
Yeah.
And then because it is a business. And then there's also the issue where these are, again, singers, actors who have, not all of them are, really highly educated in the political issues, but because their friends are pro this, they all go there, without really understanding what the issues that are being debated about, So we have that issue as well. And on that question by Wulandari, I actually mentioned this earlier, but I'll mention it again. One of the survey, Lembaga Survey, right? One of our yeah, I guess
Surveyors,
as a
Okay,
survey companies, like,
Mm.
they do surveys. Indicator, they actually came out, they released a survey with like 4,000 youths or something, especially the Generation Z. And this is why I was able to say that after corruption, the youths are interested in or concerned about environmental issues. It actually came from there. The sample, it was bigger than for the presidential election. It was so big that the sample was that big,
Yeah.
and there were that many youths that were interested in answering that particular survey, and it was interesting, and it came in at a second. So I do believe from that it is true that the youths are, one, it's, thank God, they're aware of the issue. Number two, they're not only aware, but they do care. But if the question becomes, then how do we get them to do something about it, right? Because again, you can care about it, but what are you going to do about it? Are you willing to not use fossil fuels? Are you going to be voicing out that you want electrical cars, or you want public transportation to be installed in your city? Are you going to work towards a biogas or sustainable energy for your house? Like, how far are you willing to go for those things? That should be the question. It's not that they don't care. They do care. They very much care, but they don't know how. Because again, a lot of the policies that are in place in Indonesia, even though the government, and sorry, Billy, but I have to say this, even though the government are, giving out the narration that that they care and we're pushing towards, 2050 this time, right? 2050, and it was like 2060 during COP26 for, completely carbon neutral or something like that. But the policies are very much far from it. Like, for us to install solar panels, or even just for investors to come in and build solar panel, factories, it's not worth it, because the what's being paid by the government to subsidize it is not equal to how much they actually need to spend. There's no profit right now for that. So again, that's where then I said the disappointment comes in, the frustration comes in, because there's that gap.
So that's the big picture, with that drive to better the environment, and we need policies that helps that as well. Businesses, you need probably tax incentives to do that as well. So it's a huge movement. We can't really put it on any generation, just that generation alone. So moving on, next question is for Billy. I'm just going to ask this question from Alma, University of Al-Azhar of Indonesia. With the ease of information provided by the internet, does it affect the cultural identity of generations Y and Z? And does it change their views on local cultural roots? Billy?
That's a very good question. And I was wondering about what's happening because of the digital. My assumption was that people are going to be very Americanized, very mass westernized, because people looking at the American reality shows like very connected, very homogenized because of the digital. However, my observation is that youth are then become very polarized because of the digital and information preference that they got from the digital. If you notice that we have algorithm in which we're only connected to the source of information of our preference. And that is the reason why people are very polarized. For instance, in the United States, youth or millennials who are Republican and live in the Republican community will only get information from the Republican circle that is very traditional, Christian, white, agriculture, American culture based on information. And that makes them become more and more traditional, more and more conservative. On the other hand, the youth from Democratic, who's liberal, open-minded, talking about climate change, talking about LGBTQ rights and everything, are become very strongly opinionated about that because algorithm in the social media provide them with information and the source of information about that. And it is happening also in Indonesia. When I go to other provinces, to a couple of provinces, the idea of that Jakarta has been absorbing all the resources and leave them poor is something that is being strongly opinionated because of the source of information that they got from the social media coming from the same circle. So that's number one. People have become polarized and opinionated. And number two, traditional wise, I think I would agree with that because a lot of things that we think it is our traditional values, it is not our traditional values. When we're talking about certain religion, could be either Christians or could be Islam, some of the values that we think, we become very strongly hold onto that. It is not actually our traditional values, you know, because it is coming from outside, thought from outside, from unfiltered source, and it makes us hold into something that is foreign, that is strange, that is not our traditional values. And that is the reason why, connecting to your questions to the other speakers about digital influencers, and I was talking about there are unheard heroes out there who are not connected to the social media. We need to bring them more. We need to use them as the examples for young people to look upon, instead of like just influencers, just people who have access to digital to be the source of the information for these young people.
Great. Thank you. Interesting analysis there, Billy. Now, I think we still have time for more questions. Maybe just short answers. So I'm going to ask a question from Jud Mutia from the University Al Azhar of Indonesia. Gen Y and Z are very active generations, especially on social media. But sometimes the way they give criticism and respond to issues are often too free or out of control. My question, is there a need for regulations that control speech acts in generations Y and Z on social media? Keeping in mind freedom of expression on social media is a point that is often discussed and fought for. I'd like to know if Mariko-san, if you have an opinion on this, about if you regulate the conversation in social media, what would happen if that happens?
I don't think I have the direct answer to that, but there's a similar, I think, issues seen in Japan as well. It becomes more extreme because, you know, social network, you know, you're able to express without even mentioning your name, and that sort of adds to that extremism. I don't know. I think a lot of it has to be a combination. I mean, digital, they're tools, right? And there was a mention from, I think, Sarah saying that you have to actually make use of the tools and get out there and make, you know, own actions. And when you do that action, I think what's useful is to sort of, you know, not just among your own generation, but sort of the cross-generation exchange and learn, sort of work together, so that I mean, our generation, I think we have a responsibility to open up the spaces and allow these voices to come in, or give that opportunities or responsibilities to the lower generation, because we are like a huge sort of a thick, you know, sort of a, what do you call it, sector of decision makers, and mostly men, I have to say. Still, I mean, the government politicians, the average age are like in the mid 50s, or some can go up to the 60s in the municipality level, etc. And there was only one in the 20s that got elected this time, only one. And so it's really crazy, and hearing a lot of the views coming from Indonesia, and I think Japan has to seriously really look into, you know, working together with these generations, because I think, you know, otherwise we're going to really sink. So like, yes, the frustrations, or I mean, the opinions sometimes are really good or positive. They just need to have more experience, learn more about it, sort of, you know, try to look at the balance, and be more innovative that way, right? And come up with new ideas that way. So I think rather than regulating, I hope there's a more positive way, so that, you know, it can be turned into a positive force.
Thank you, Mariko-san. Now, Marco-san, I'd like to know your opinion. If you put control on these freedom that they have now, what could happen there?
To me, right? Oh, the
Yes,
freedom they
you.
have now. I think I don't know. Sorry, may I change the answer to the question that you've given to the Mariko-san? Maybe I don't know what to do with the depression and the
Yeah,
media, maybe.
so it'll be interesting.
Oh,
Like the Gen Y and Z, they
yeah.
have the freedom to express. So
Yes. So yeah. So that was a question. So I think that is still okay, but instead what I think they need is two things. One is education on how to confront with the digital, how to not to be too consumed by those what they see. Another thing is the education on the self-esteem as well. So especially in Japan, I think, but we're not taught to have like high self-esteem, more about the try to have a self-criticism to be better self. And then that if it comes together with the digital, it becomes a bit it forces you to have more self-reviewing and might lead it to the self-depression. So I think freedom is, yes, I think it's quite important, as Mariko-san mentioned, because it can create the positive causes that we're seeing in Japan as well. So what I think is needed is education on the how to protect their mentals and the how to treat the digital in a very nice way.
not by control, but by educating. All right,
Yeah.
thank you. I'd like to know just shortly your opinion as well. I'll start with Sarah first.
On exactly the same question. Well, number
Exactly
one,
the same question.
yeah. So number one, I'm one of those who believe that if you have too many regulations, it actually shows a decline in your civilization. Because when you need to regulate everything, it actually shows that you're lacking in the education sector, you're lacking in mental health education, and that's the other thing that I will say is we're seeing a lot of cyberbullying here in Indonesia, and that's why the question is posed. We're seeing a lot of cyberbullying, and criticisms that are not. It's not constructive criticism. It's really just hate speech. So we're seeing a lot of that, and it's very unfiltered and it's very unhealthy. That was exactly what we say, like makanan sehari-hari. That's what I was literally like. Oh, that was my consumption every day, day in, day out, during elections, and especially during the times of highly contested issues. During the sexual abuse eradication bill, in my period, that's how long the discussion has been taking place. It's been taking place for years. But during that debate, one time I was being sent, like literally, I would call it terrorized by hundreds of messages coming onto my personal number. So my personal number was already being spread out, and their buzzers were already being told to send every single one of us that are, all the politicians, all the representatives, messages saying that they want us to stop that discussion. They are against us passing the sexual abuse eradication bill. So I think it's not a regulation we already have ITE, and even that, the whole, even that regulation that is regulating free speech in a way, on the digital world is already being contested, because it is very much, and even there is a law that states if you criticize the president, you can go to jail. So you'll be fined. I mean, that's already basically putting limitations on free speech. But I think it's not necessarily about it's not about regulation. I agree with Moka-san when she said it is about education. But what specifically we're educating? We need to educate critical thinking, and what it means by critical thinking, it's how to relay your thoughts in a constructive way, not in just simply just for criticism's sake, just to appear. We have a saying, "Tong kosong nyaring bunyinya," here in Indonesia, as in you speak a lot, you talk a lot, but you actually have nothing to say. So it's very So the education in critical thinking is very critical. But the other thing is about mental health issue as well, that everyone, so this is full circle. Everyone's been mentioning about mental health. We really need to really look into that, because it is affecting the mental health of the youths and any of the social media users here in Indonesia. And the bullying is happening, and it's happening very badly. And we have suicide rates going up because of it as well. So, and I think Japan's been dealing a lot with mental health issues, with suicide rates as well, to do with that, because they're so isolated. And with this pandemic, that's the only way they get in touch with the outside world. And I remember watching a documentary where in Japan, you have youths who are so afraid of getting out of their room, their house. They literally stay inside all the time. And here in Indonesia, we really need to be aware of that, potentially happening. Thanks, Tim.
I agree. So I'd just like to give probably a half minute to Billy, your comments on this to wrap us up.
I think it's well covered, Timothy. I agree with every single point that was made by these wonderful female speakers. Smart people. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Billy. And I'd like to thank everyone. However, I've already passed 1 minute from my allocated time.
I just want to touch one thing,
Sure.
Timothy, just one very short thing. I think extending from Sarah's point about that young people know, aware and care, but they don't know how to, be involved. I totally agree with it. I think in our talks today, we tend to put the young people as the main or as the only subject that they don't want to be involved in solving the problem. But don't forget that when we're talking about the government, there is also inequality in the government in terms of capacity between the national government, provincial level government, and regency governments, and different provinces have different capacities. My experience when I went to different provinces, there are a lot of wonderful young people who have been doing great things, and they want to involve, they want to help the government, but the government feel like, no, you're young, you don't know a thing, we don't want to keep doing what we want to do as what we do. So I want a movement for kind of, revolve the way the government, especially in the local governments, do things, to have a willingness and open heart to involve the young people, to work together with them. Because if we do that, Indonesia I think will be one of the strongest nation in the world, just even before 2030. If that happens, we're ready. We're gonna beat Japan, I hope.
That's probably hard to do. So thank you very much once again, Billy. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mariko-san. Also, thank you, Moka-san, for the very insightful conversation. I hope we could have these conversations more in the future, especially as we'll be seeing more and more from Gen Y and Gen Z, especially Gen Z, as they're starting to come into to the world, to working life, and so on. We'll see how they will shape our world in the future. So it's exciting to see, and we have high hopes for that. I hope you all success and health in the future in your respective areas. Thank you very much. I'll just give it back to Sasa right away. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tim, and our speakers for their great insights. Please give a round of applause or virtual reactions for our moderator and speakers. And as we are nearing the end of the discussion, we would like to extend our gratitude to the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies for co-organizing the forum. We also would like to thank all participants who have joined us and for your participation today. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to FPCI social handles for more information regarding our activities, upcoming events, and programs. Thank you so much for tuning in. Goodbye and see you next year at FPCI's future events. Stay safe and healthy.